Hello, everyone. Thank you for signing on to APTA's Mobility Innovation Pilot of the Month webinar. Today, we will dive into the Fastpass fare payment system in play in Portland, Oregon region with a particular look at the open architecture characteristics. Doug Kelsey and his TriMet All-Stars are taking a major step towards developing a mobility as a service platform. I am Art Gazzetti, APTA's Vice President for Mobility Initiatives and Policy. I'd like to just read a quote on sort of a national view of the changing mobility ecosystem. This is from APTA's APTA President and CEO Paul Skatellis. Quote, "It is well recognized that the landscape of surface transportation is in a state of transformational change and flux. This new mobility paradigm requires public transit to be inventive, innovative, and bold in forging new partnerships with new providers, adopting cutting-edge technologies, and meeting customers' evolving desire for more flexible, customized service." I think that sums up what we're trying to accomplish in our webinar, to take a look at new service models, take a look at new innovations. Let's see, additional information on today's topic and the full range of transformative ideas and new operating models can be found on the Mobility Innovation Hub on APTA's website. I encourage you to make that a frequent and regular stop as you navigate the web and contribute your own ideas on new practices that are in play in your own communities. Each month or so, APTA will hold another Mobility Innovation Pilot of the Month webinar to look at a new breakthrough or service innovation. We will schedule one in early August to take a look at the Sacramento RTD and its collaboration with the full range of micro-mobility providers, including bike and scooters. More to follow. We are interested in your ideas and invite you to send APTA your suggestions. Again, one to be scheduled in early August, featuring Sacramento, and more to follow after that. I'll now introduce today's speakers. We have David Zipper from DZ Strategies, who will facilitate the conversation. We're pleased to have Doug Kelsey, the General Manager of TriMet in Portland, Oregon. We have Tim McHugh, the Chief Information Officer at TriMet, and Ryan Schwab, the Director of Fare Revenue and Administrative Services at TriMet. I'd like to now turn things over to our irrepressible David Zipper, who will moderate today's conversation. And David, pass the program to you. Also, we invite your participation of the webinar audience. As we go through, David will explain how you can enter the discussion.
Well, thanks very much, Art. It's great to be with you for another Pilot of the Month presentation. And for those I may not know, I am a writer and an advisor to APTA on issues around the future of urban mobility. And these Pilots of the Month are always fun, and I'm excited to dive into the HOP Fastpass and open architecture with you today. Next slide, please. So we're only going to have a short period of time here for the webinar, but in case you just can't get enough and you want to dive deeper into the HOP Fastpass, there is a memo about 4 pages long that goes into more detail, has more information, all about sort of how HOP was designed, why it was designed the way that it was, and it's available on, as Art was mentioning, the Mobility Innovation Hub. So I do encourage you to check it out if you want to go further into this topic, or for that matter, if you have colleagues or other people you know who aren't able to join us today but want to learn about it further later. Next slide. And also, this is for those who've joined us before for Pilot of the Month webinars, you'll know this. We always try to provide you, the APTA members, with some resources that you can use to learn from, or for that matter, benevolently copy if you feel like there's something that the agency that we're focusing on has done that you might be able to use yourself. And I'm really grateful to the TriMet team, whoever that is, for providing a couple documents that are really important to HOP and open architecture that are available now on the Mobility Innovation Hub page where the memo is. You can get the scope of work that HOP used to hire a systems integrator. This would, and you'll understand when you see this pretty lengthy document of open architecture is sort of is a theme throughout this document. And also there are the user agreements for vendors to access the APIs or advanced programming interfaces for the HOP Fastpass, another really critical component of the open architecture design of HOP. So thanks again to TriMet for making that available on the Mobility Innovation Hub site. Next slide. And as Art mentioned, this is meant to be participatory. There will be time set aside at the end for you, the audience, to ask questions. Art's going to be curating the questions that you enter through the little question box that you should see on the GoToWebinar control panel. So at any point during the presentation and the conversation we're about to have, please do feel free to enter in a question, and we'll be reviewing them and posing them just in a little bit later in the session. Next slide. And I think now we're ready to dive in. So let's turn things over to the TriMet team. Doug, maybe I can kick things off with you. Just set the stage for us. Tell us a little bit about TriMet and about the market that you serve.
Sure. Thanks, David, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody, depending on the time zone you're at. So yeah, a little bit of context about TriMet's responsibilities. We serve 3 counties, and one Multnomah County, Washington County, and Clackamas County. We are a freestanding government agency, and in fact, legally, we're actually the equivalent of a municipality. We cover 533 square miles. Like others, we have a bus system, we have light rail, 5 lines, as you can see on the map, a relatively small commuter rail operation, and parent transit services. So it's an integrated agency, and the governance structure is really crucial to benefiting the model for success here. So next slide. In terms of some of our scope, we carry about 99 million trips taken each year on average. We are, in terms of scope, the 24th largest metro in the U.S., but transit ridership-wise, we're actually 9th per capita. So our modal penetration is actually pretty effective here. We have about 315,000 trips per day, and that actually makes TriMet, because of our legal structure, Oregon's 2nd largest city, which is most people don't think of it in those terms. 76% of adults in the region ride at least once a year, and that's almost the equivalent, almost 80% in terms of support from people. They rate us favorably from our public. So relatively high penetration from public acceptance in this region. Next slide, please. In terms of the overall community we serve, current bus fleet is approximately 700. We're growing to 1,000 here in about the next 4 or 5 years, electrifying the fleet totally by 2040 or before. We have 80 bus lines with just under, now it's about 7,000 bus stops. We have our MAX is what we refer to as our light rail system. We have 145 vehicles serving 5 lines, over 60 miles, and 107 stations. And if you follow the news yesterday, always a lot of popularity when you try and close some of those, which I did yesterday at our board meeting. So in terms of our commuter rail, we have 6 vehicles serving 5 stops and over 14.7 miles of freight track. We do not own our own track. In terms of the paratransit, we refer to as Lyft. We have 268 vehicles that provide our services, seniors, and of course, with people with disabilities, very similar to other agencies throughout North America. We also have a streetcar partnership. The assets are owned by the city of Portland, and however, we basically do all the O&M, our operators of the vehicles, and the maintenance is all done by our staff. So a very successful partnership, and that's a growing system as well. Next slide. So I think from the conversation here, as we translate from our context of our system, we're also in transition. As Paul Skoutelis referenced earlier, not only do we provide core transit services, what you've just heard before, but we have altered our vision, mission, and values of the company fundamentally to not just be in the transit system anymore, but we're moving to be an integrator of mobility options. So we're looking to make seamless integrations with many other options, which you can see on the screen in front of you. Of course, walking, biking, aerial tram, car share, ride source, the Uber Lyfts, Waymos of the world, the Portland streetcar, looking to integrate our park and ride lots. And over time, we're working on some pilots right now to about accessible sidewalks and paths, other bus systems, and more beyond the scope of what we do today. E-scooters, we have a lot of those moving out through the city of Portland here right now. Ride sourcing and on-demand shuttles, and you can see the carpooling with our friends at Share Now, pedicabs, and who knows what else next. So if you follow the Ubers and others of the world, you know, who knows, maybe in the air. So we do know that we are acknowledging, different than the typical transit model, that we are only one part of a palette of how our customers get around. So it's flipping it on its head and looking at our agency less as an operational culture, but more as a customer-centric culture. And therefore, we're only one part of that stream to remove the points of friction that our customers have to undertake every day to move around on their terms every day. So moving from an operating culture to a customer-centric culture. And at the core of it is using the technology and mobility options to seam, if you will, the glue between the tiles of services together.
So I'll jump in here. You know, Doug, you talk about seamless integration being an overarching goal of TriMet. I have a hunch that played a big role in TriMet's vision and development of the HOP Fastpass payment system. So let's ask about that. Can you talk a little bit, you and the team, but what were your goals with the HOP Fastpass? And I know you built it through open architecture, so I want to ask why.
So I'm just going to turn this over to the first part of this over to Tim and Ryan, and I might have a few comments, particularly what that strategic platform means for us on a going forward basis as well. So I'll turn over to them for the first part.
Perfect. So hi, everyone. This is Ryan Schaub. First, let me start by defining what HOP is briefly, just in case anyone isn't fully aware. In a nutshell, HOP is an account-based regional fare collection system with industry-leading features like stored value, fare capping, open payments, open architecture, and virtualized smart cards. Our vision for that system started by building a business case around the cost of fare collection, and that really drove all of our key design decisions. We didn't just focus on revenue impacts, but the equally important cost impacts with data such as credit card interchange, retail commission, equipment maintenance, and the future cost of upgrading our system to keep pace with technology changes. After many peer reviews and hours of analysis, we had a clear picture for the path forward. And this really encouraged all of our policy decisions, such as, again, open architecture and a mobile phone or bring your own device type of approach. We also wanted to improve convenience and access for our customers and future-proof the system as much as possible. This meant building a system that functioned on open architecture, encouraging open payments, stored value with fare capping, and a vast expansion of our retail network for accessibility. Anything you two would like to add on vision there?
Yeah, I think that one of the...
Let's add, go on a slide.
Oh, yes, please. Next slide. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, I would add that the open architecture was a real prevalent piece that we discussed a lot early on. And open architecture means a lot of things, but one of the biggest keys to that was the open APIs, the application programming interfaces that at the time were not quite as prevalent. You start to see that more and more prevalent with other providers throughout the transportation space. And the key is really to maintain that ability to move forward, to maintain flexibility, and to not have one monolithic system that is stagnant as new options start to explode, and as we've been very fortunate because new options have obviously exploded.
Yeah, so I might just add on to this, it's Doug. You know, when I look at the generation here, the genesis of this, the open payment architecture is a really important platform for this agency. If we look at down the road, we're in this region having conversations right now around congestion pricing. So it's not just about transit, it's making sure that should the region move to that, on a broader scale, that making sure the smart card, the open architecture, is part of that conversation as we integrate whatever services, even around smart cities. How do you integrate all this together as much as possible? For me, as the general manager here, often the cards can be seen as, yes, a revenue collection tool. It can be used as for some of the services that we provide. I also believe, because of the changing landscape of, I'll call, beyond transit in terms of how you get around, I believe this card, we're still working through this, it should move from a transit card to a lifestyle card, and including look at things we are exploring right now, like loyalty programs that are not just loyalty for discounting your transit price, because once you discount your price, you can't get it back up. It's really hard. But how do you relay loyalty into it? The part, and also to go with the loyalty card, is also fundamentally using this card and loyalty with transportation demand management. So that's not really been done before that we're aware of, but we don't have the solution, but we're exploring that now. So the vision for us is really integrating beyond transit to lifestyle, all the different ways you get around.
Let me ask one clarifying question, because I think a lot of people on the webinar probably hear the terms open architecture and open payments, which can be a little bit confusing, but they mean different things. Could I ask if one of you could clarify what each of them means to you?
Yeah, so open payment refers to the ability to pay with a standard credit card that through Google Pay, Apple Pay, or any other card that can be tapped. So that's the support that we have for open payment. Open architecture is entirely different and often gets confused. The word open is used in many different contexts: open API, open architecture, open standards, open data. Those are all components of an open architecture. So that you have an API means you can communicate with a different technology through a standardized interface to accomplish a task, instead of having a completely closed off system. So the best way to just say open architecture is it's not closed. It's just thinking of the opposite of a monolithic system that you cannot interface with at all. So like I said, open data, open standards, open APIs, those are all components of a general open architecture.
Got it. Thanks, Tim. I think, Ryan, do you want to keep going with your overview? Mm-hmm.
Sure. Next slide, please. So our open API approach, or open architecture approach, allowed us to pick and choose which partners we wanted to work with on each part of the HOP system. And here you'll see a lot of them listed on the slide. This allowed us to create a curated team of experts. In it was our core partner as they developed our central system and the open APIs other partners used for the integration. And now when we see an idea, whether it's a new technology or startup, we can consider an integration with them without having to worry about whether or not our back-end or system integrator is willing to partner with them. Our options are really endless for what we can build. For example, if our TVMs reach end of life, we can do an RFP for any fare collection vendor to bring in a new set of TVMs and utilize our open APIs. We don't need to have init TVMs, just as an example. Next slide, please. I wanted to show you what it looks like from the customer's perspective to have an open system. And this is showing you many different aspects of our HOP system here. And what you'll notice is the branding is consistent throughout. So on the far right, you'll see a Scheiten-Bachmann TVM that's connecting to our init backend. At the very bottom, you see an init validator connecting to the init backend. On the left, you see 2 screenshots of our mobile app. On the top there, you'll see our HOP cards hanging in the retail network, and on the very, very top, you'll see our website. What the customer sees is our brand, our HOP Fastpass brand. The customer does not see that there is a different vendor involved in many of these different means of communicating with the customer and bringing them into the HOP system. To them, it's all HOP and it's seamless. Go ahead, next slide.
Yeah. So I think at this point, unless Ryan, were you done? I was going to ask a couple of questions, unless you had another thought you wanted to share right there.
No, that's perfect. Thanks, David.
Sure. So first of all, just for for clarification, can you give a quick sense of timing for when Hop launched? And I know it's been developing over time, but perhaps you can give sort of like a brief timeline for folks.
Sure. So we started laying policy groundwork in 2010, 2011, and then we launched HOP in 2017. So that gives you a sense of how long it took us to really get our regional alignment amongst our agencies, get the development and procurements done, and then get the system ready to go prime time for the public. So that was fall of 17, summer fall of 17 that we launched. And then the following spring, later that fall, we launched open payments, so the ability to tap your contactless payment card on our system. We launched that functionality. Following that, in April-ish of 18, we launched the Android Virtual Smart Card. And then just recently, a couple months ago, we launched the Apple Virtual Smart Card. So we continue to provide improvements and different iterations of the HOP system to our customer, though we launched in spring of 17.
Got it.
17, thereabout.
And did you think I know you guys have been involved with this process for years now. Was the procurement process for HOP different because you were pursuing this open architecture vision? And if so, how?
Well, it definitely was. This is Tim. It was complicated in that there are multiple vendors who don't necessarily sign on with each other in order to do the development as traditionally would be done. Traditionally, when we would put an RFP out for a fair payment system, they would gather their partners together to do the different components of that. This time, they're putting in a submittal with an agreement to work with other parties that we may or may not have selected yet. So the sequence of procurements was important. The discussion about what it really means to be the back end and the system integrator, which was in it in this case, how that actually plays out with the different components. So it was very carefully thought out exactly how we were going to put this out there and how it would be comfortable for the people to bid and succeed on the project. But I would say the key in all of that is to be a good partner with them. For every single one of those players, we weren't looking for somebody to choke. We were looking to partner with them completely on it, and we would take on complete responsibility ourselves to make sure that the system works together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to build off of that, I hear, and I'm sure you guys have heard too, lots of transit agencies bemoan how complicated and sometimes expensive change orders can be when they want to adjust a component of their overall system. And I'm wondering if you could explain a little bit about how, if you do want to change something, how that process could be a little bit different in an open architecture system like HOP.
Sure, I can speak to that. So if I wanted to change the way the existing APIs functioned, so what Init had already built for us, if I wanted to change the way those worked or add a new one, that is a change order that I'm paying for Init. But if I want to bring on a new partner to utilize the existing APIs as they are today, there is no cost from Init to TriMet to do that. There may be a cost between TriMet and the new vendor I'm bringing on for them to program to those APIs, but I basically saved myself a potential 50% of that development cost because one of those parties isn't going to charge me, if that makes sense. And feel free, David, to tell me if you want me to elaborate or give another example.
No, I think that's great. I think that's really helpful, and it leads into the next question, which is just to ask point blank. Can you explain what you see? I know you're still or HOP is still developing, but what's the benefit that you're already experiencing from HOP being built? Maybe it's monetary, maybe it's flexibility. How do you define it? How do you think about it?
I would say it's flexibility. I mean, it gives us the ability to look to the horizon without having to ask permission or ensure that the vendor is willing to go there with us. I mean, we continue to be a great partner with them, but these APIs, this open system gives us the flexibility to be able to partner with whomever we want to because our system can support it. And that comes with it some inherent cost savings down the road. Tim, would you add anything?
Yeah, I'd say it gives us the ability to work from both ends on that too. We can work on it from the perspective of adding new functionality as you know, all these new modes and everything is coming up. It really gives us the ability to plug into new services and to integrate, but also it gives us the ability to tie in with other agencies. There are other governmental programs that we can consider tying in directly so that we can get a really robust mobility as a service platform, which is what we weren't thinking about that necessarily at the start, but because we have the open architecture, we have the ability to adjust.
Like what?
So, Doug, I wouldn't mind just adding on a little bit here. I think to the points made, I think it gives us a nimbleness, because often we spend so much time developing, as this agency did long before I was here. They did a really nice job on getting the business rules nailed. If you don't, that is in itself inherent change orders and complexity and a recipe for stalling. But it gives us competitive advantage and more in control of the private supplier marketplace for products and services, no matter what may be needed or not in the future. Often, because we're a highly capitalized industry, today we're talking software and some hardware, often because our procurement cycles can be long, the technology world is moving so fast, it gives us the ability to not be locked into the method of how we're going to execute the customer relationship based on the limitation of the model we actually had in front of us without a massive supplemental capital project. Because ultimately we have to compete, we encourage competing internally for capital in this organization to bring best value. So even products like this have to compete relative to all the other hungry opportunities that are out there. So the flexibility is good. I think it costs us ultimately less capital by having that nimbleness and allows us to manage the supplier marketplace in different ways and connect to future products, i.e. congestion pricing, which weren't on the list probably in 2010 when this was even a conversation. So there are new products that are on the horizon that we don't even know today that will allow us to do it rather than a structural change. It's more of an adaptive change.
And did open architecture help you connect the HOP system with other transit agencies themselves? Like, for example, like C-Trans, or I believe the Portland streetcar is separate. I'm curious about that piece as well.
It did from the standpoint of that they each have, their own components for, a CAT ABL system, what they have on board for their vehicles. It enabled those pieces for the specific integration into the HOP system overall. But it also sets them up as well.
David, I just want to add a bit to this one as well. There's sort of within the market agencies, and there's also, like many other agencies here, we're also reaching out right now to other transit agencies who have rail lines directly to the airport. So there are many of our choice customers who have the choice, who have money to spend because they're business travelers or tourist travelers. How do we connect cities together and regions together, whether it be Seattle, Hawaii, Honolulu as they develop their system, Portland, et cetera. So beyond the region or the area codes in question, to allow us to start, instead of carrying more and more cards, this allows us to have some of those potential future partnerships that may not exist between fundamental transit agencies on a broader scale to make the customer's experience, again, those who have choice alternatives to whether they want to spend their money and how. Do I take an Uber, do I take a Lyft, or take transit home with one card?
Well, that's actually exactly what I was going to ask about next, which is, do you see the open architecture of HOP as an enabler of mobility as a service, which in my mind would involve sort of integrated trip planning and ticketing, not just for the TriMet's system, but potentially including ride hail and scooters, bike share, so forth and so on. Is that part of your strategy now?
It absolutely is. I think, there's two ways you can kind of look at it. One is HOP is going to grow, and we're going to have more and more things under that umbrella and paying through it. The other way is there's a lot of other things that are growing outside of that environment that we want to tie into, and it doesn't have to be an either or. The open architecture allows you to do both at the same time and completely seamlessly to the customer. And like you said, itinerary planning, the tie-in of multiple modes into an itinerary, and how do you move from just having that itinerary to actually executing it in a seamless manner so that the customer has a frictionless experience moving around without their car. That's the ultimate goal. And we really want to just put the technologies in place that enable that to happen while we build the relationships with all of the other providers.
Great. I'm going to ask one more question, but I do want to encourage those who are listening in, if you haven't already, to submit your questions to a little question box on GoToWebinar. We're going to turn to Art to just a moment. But I do want to ask, maybe as a concluding question to the panel here, what do you advise to the transit agency reps who are listening in? Is this a strategy of open architecture you advise that they pursue? And if so, are there lessons you would offer them from your own experience with HOP?
Yeah, I can offer one. So I absolutely do believe that open architecture is something other agencies should at least consider pursuing in their RFPs. One lesson learned that I think was pretty clear for us about halfway through the project was that we should have staged the development slightly differently. We brought on all of our partners at the same time so that we were designing and developing the APIs while we were developing the website, while we were developing the apps. And the website and the apps utilized the APIs that were in flux during development. So it led to some bottlenecks and sort of cart before horse situations at times where we were trying to develop a user interface and how that functionality would look and feel before the structure for how that functionality would actually work was completed. And that led to a bit of rework here and there. So I think if we were to do it again, we would have staggered the development so that the APIs were more in the range of 75% complete before we started really digging into the user interface design, just to allow for a bit more of an elegant coordination between all of the partners. So that would be one lesson learned I would offer. The other would be really understanding the operational impact this is going to have on the agency. For example, for any change that we make to the system, it's about 40 hours of regression testing and really understanding, the impact to staffing that comes with operating a system like that is something that, I don't know that we could have done a better job of it, but hindsight is certainly helpful in that sense.
Yeah, I would add to that, while that was very painful on the APIs, I think it did yield a better product. I think having all of those other parties going through all of that pain, it was painful. Wish we didn't have to do that, but I think it did yield a lot more opinions on how the APIs came out in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For me, Tim raised a point a couple comments ago, I think was really important, is because of, I'm just trying to look at our transit agency cultures that we have as this industry. You think this capital project's the one that's going to be it for the next platform for the next many, many years, when in fact, you're going to have to really hit your mark, and that's assuming no other products and the customer demands are not going to change. So being locked into just one technology method and type, I think in today's dynamic world, may be too risky. So I think having this plus other alternatives, and I'm going to declare, many, many years ago, I used to work for Shell Oil. We had our own credit card company, but we sure had to learn quickly to not put all your eggs in one basket of that one credit card, because in fact, there are a palette of many other ways that people choose their lifestyle to live and pay. And so don't just say that's the only way in your company culture. It should just be one of alternatives.
All right, well, thank you for that. And thank you to all the panelists. We're about to take some questions, but I do just want to remind everyone listening in that on the Mobility Innovation Hub, there is a more detailed memo if you want more information about what we're discussing. And there's also the scope of work for the systems integrator for HOP and the user agreements for vendors to access the HOP APIs. So I encourage you to check those out. With that, I'm happy to turn things back over to Art, who is going to pose some questions from the audience.
And we've got a wealth of questions here. I've tried to consolidate many of them. I think I'm going to, and please keep submitting them because we'll try, it helps us inform and we can try to answer them even after the call. But I'm going to try to hit 5. So if we could go with 2 minutes each on the answer, I think we can get them all in, or at least these 5 in the remaining time. First one is, how does HOP allow flexibility in future changes to FAIR policies, creation of new FAIR products? Is there a cash option remaining? And how about vending machines, a timeline for that? All those questions on flexibility.
Sure, I can take that. So HOP comes with a very robust and flexible tariff. So any changes we want to make to our FAIR structure or adding a new product, that can all be done in the tariff at zero cost. Now, if we want to add something that's sort of really, really different, I don't know, something that would go against the architecture of FAIR capping that we've built today, then there may be a change order involved. But for 99% of cases I can think of, it's just creating a new product in the tariff, which is something we can do in-house at TriMet's. There was a question in there about the ticket vending machines. So our Scheitenbachmann ticket vending machines are now fully integrated with the HOP system, utilizing the init APIs. We put new faceplates on them, so the ticket vending machines are now HOP TVMs. So that has already happened. Art, can you remind me of any other pieces of that question I may have missed?
Cash?
Oh, cash. Yes, I love that question. So we have a robust retail network of over 500 locations where folks with cash in hand can go and load value onto their HOP card. This is 7-Elevens, Kroger grocery stores, places that people are already going in their day-to-day lifestyle. They can do that now and add cash to their HOP card. So that exists today.
Okay, another question I'll throw on integration. Of course, you've talked about that a lot, but how about things like some of the highway tolling? Might this actually extend to highway tolling at some point? We talked a little bit about other agencies, but might all other regional agencies, CTRAN, for example, come under this system? How about paratransit services beyond the traditional transit? How do you integrate those?
Do you want me to start, guys?
Let me start with this. I'll talk to the congestion.
Okay, perfect. So we are in the process of finishing up a beta launch of the HOP system on our paratransit service. So it is already, the system is already outfitted to work with it. The integration is complete. We worked with Trapeze. They're using the HOP APIs. So that is underway. We are taking sort of a slow and steady approach to that transition and really working with those customers on a one-on-one basis and transitioning them over. But the technology work is complete now. It's just about communicating it to the people. So do you want to talk about congestion pricing?
Yeah, congestion pricing here is very much in its infancy. So I was probably the one who kind of reached out to the Oregon Department of Transportation team and said, look, while you're looking separately at this, I think there's sort of 2 elements to this. One is, can you integrate it, make sure the technology of it exists to accept it. So it's, while you're sending the parameters out for an RFP on congestion pricing for technology, make sure that's one of the elements that it permits its use. Secondly, to go with this, it's not just around the revenue transaction. So yes, it may have the capability down the road to be one of the usage for ways to pay. But the other part, and I don't want to let this go, is also, can you use this same technology platform for loyalty? For X, after 20 trips, you get a free transit trip, et cetera, et cetera. You can start to use it for transportation demand management, behavior shaping, where a transit alternative exists with a road one. So it can serve 2 purposes, one on pricing and the technology, but actually on the TDM behavior shaping as well.
And if I could add one thing about cash too and congestion pricing, again, I can't give enough props to our retail network. And when we think about utilizing HOP for congestion pricing on a statewide basis, our retail network is a really attractive feature because it would allow customers statewide. I mean, I've spoken with the vendor and, I would say conservatively in a matter of months, we could expand our existing retail network to a statewide capacity. So we could have folks border to border in Oregon being able to take their cash in hand, load it to a hop card, and, barring some other integrations, utilize those funds to pay for congestion pricing or toll roads. So it's a really exciting opportunity that we hope to be able to leverage.
And that's where I see the real opportunity beyond, I'll call, across multiple transit agencies, not just within a state, but if we sign up with other players, you just go to, it's 7-Eleven for anyone who's playing. So they've got I come from a retail background. Their distribution network, once it's set up, it's basically just another SKU. That's all it really is, another distribution panel. But for us, once we get the rules set, you can pick it up in Seattle and use it in Portland or use it in Sacramento or Phoenix or anywhere. So tapping into their retail network is very low cost for them, and it's a great benefit of distribution channels for us.
Excellent. Some questions coming in about data. The Hop Pass is about, fare collection. What about the data? Do you able to collect additional pieces of data through this system, and how do you plan on using that?
Well, we have the tap data. So every time the customer boards, they tap. We do not have tap off. That was a conscious choice, but we can change that at any time. System would support it. We haven't utilized it much to date, but it's certainly there for taking. I think a key thing that we want to be careful about is the privacy information. We've been very careful to anonymize that data. And also an extra step that we took on this, which I think everybody should think about, is that before we released the system, we went to the Oregon legislature and we got a special exemption from the FOIA request, that information is not FOIAble, so that the journey that a customer is taking in connection with the payment system is not FOIAble. And I would say the one thing I wish we had not done is said in connection with the payment system, because I think that any customer traveling around for whatever reason, travel pattern information is personalized information that should be protected. But that's just my opinion.
Okay, I'm going to try to squeeze in two more. The last one is of a big picture nature. The one now I'd like to throw at you is there was a lot of development time, a lot of development costs into this system. How about a smaller agency that might not have the resources? Is there a way that what you've done here could be applied to them, or what steps could a smaller agency take in putting a similar system into place?
I've got a couple of thoughts. One, the fewer customizations you are making, the less time it will take and the less expensive it will be. It took us so much time because we were doing something that was sort of the first of its kind. We were trying to, get the different parties involved to understand what it was going to be like to be creating an open system together and managing 10 different contracts and getting them all through procurements and then doing design and development with those 10 different partners, right? So I think the first time you do something like that in an industry, it's going to be a heavier lift. Now, I think there's an example that people can look to. I think you could certainly, look to our scope of work and get some great lessons learned there, and then look for systems that are out there today that exhibit some of those same qualities, and really focus within your agency on what is a must-have and what is a nice-to-have, and let those things guide you in terms of prioritizing what you must customize and what you can live without customizing. Or you could look to a larger agency that perhaps has already built something like this, and you could consider joining, right? So one of the things that we talk about with other transit agencies within the state of Oregon or other adjacent agencies, even regionally, talking Pacific Northwest or even around the states, if there is an opportunity to partner here and allow folks to use one system seamlessly across jurisdictions, let's explore that. The openness of our system allows that, and it could be done at a relatively low cost depending on the size and, again, the customizations that would have to be made. Anything you guys would add?
The other thing, this kind of reminds me of the conversation as the industry tries to deal with getting to standards on purchasing light rail vehicles. it starts off in the spirit of very, it all makes sense, let's synergize it. But as you get to the details, the exceptions are costly if you can't play. So the sort of that competitive model, I mean, Michael Porter invented it many, many years ago, what is your differentiation strategy and how expensive or how much are you prepared to put at it if you're a smaller agency where you've got to have a standalone system, because there's a price to pay for that versus being part of a broader transactional side. So the smaller agency would have to determine to what degree does it need customization, because customization is also code for cost, and it often gets lost. Maybe code is change order and stuff like that. So the more you can fit into any agency's back room that supports the principles that you share, that should, I think, very much be encouraged and explored. I do believe this is a broader conversation for the industry around fundamentally IT. Not today, it's this product or those other ones, because you want to really target overheads. There's a cost for overheads, and where you can synergize those, that's where the prize hopefully is equal or to greater benefit that offsets against customization. So there's a spectrum the person, I think, has to play on where do they want to invest, and then the cost of individual ownership does have a price tag.
Thank you. Very excellent. We're just a little bit over, but I'm going to ask one more big question and then wrap up. And it's a big question, Doug, probably to you. But is there, when you do something major and transformative like this, is it rooted in a fundamental business strategy or business policy? Is it start at that big level thinking, or do you just sort of experiment with the possibilities and end up coming upon something like this? So how did you do it? Did you start with the big picture and work down from there?
Well, I think this has to be shared between Ryan, Tim, and myself. I was not here at the time when this was started, but I have been through other agencies who've gone through a similar kind of conversation. So I'll share that perspective. But I think part of it is having a lot of these things come to culture. And something that I think the industry is going to have to face is a willingness to have courage, and to pilot and to test things, and to be, because for me, I worked a lot of time in big capital private sector. And there's a difference that I found, Art, between private sector and public sector. The public sector spends a lot of money to eliminate risk. The private sector spends money to manage it. And so their risk profile is different in how they manage it. And so, but I would say what I've seen in the culture the years that I've been here now, there is very much an innovative part of the culture when it chooses to do so. I think we all have our spectrum of stuff. You kind of go, this really makes sense. Let's go after it. Let's spend intellectual time and capital on it. Another part saying, just manage what you're doing today. So you have to pick where you want to play, because I don't think every agency has only so many resources. And it's where do you want to allocate that intellectual, innovative, courageous time to it. I think, so part of it, and I don't know if Tim and your own experience relative to what I just said, because they lived it, I didn't. So
yeah, I would say it's a little of both. And I think, face it, where we came from, we were paper-based. We were in the dark ages of fair payment, and we really needed to do something. And that really was the conscious choice, was that we want to be more innovative. I think that was definitely a driving force in all of it. And it's like, no matter what we do, we're going to get a better payment system, and we're going to do it for our customers, and it's going to be innovative. That was kind of the key core to it. And it developed over time as things changed. And it was definitely a take it to the top. Let's talk about exactly what we're going to be doing with the system and how we move it along in a very customer-friendly way and in a very innovative way. And that openness towards, as things change, kind of developed through that process. And along the way, we stumbled across a lot of little things that are pretty cool. So.
I think we had to establish those big vision ideas to guide us, but they had to be big enough that we could be flexible and nimble along the way, right? We had those overarching goals for the system. In fact, we called them the principles and policies of the board every time we went in front of the board for HOP, to remind the board that these were our guiding principles and policies for what the system should be. And then within that, though, they were broad enough to allow us to make decisions and be nimble and agile along the way and adapt to technology and change and new insights about what the customer really wanted. So it is a combination of both there, I think.
I think Ryan raised a really interesting point. It's very important to make sure your board is on side culturally, because they can, do you execute the basics, or what is the courage level of the board? Because beyond smart cards, HOP, let's go to Obamacare, let's go anywhere that deals with software, every day has complex problems and disruptions, because it's not perfect. And so it's what is the temperature of, I'll call the leadership, and as a compliment to my predecessor, Neil McFarland, is playing in that space, and the board. It's very important that those two groups be really tight to bring along. Otherwise, it will fall apart when things don't go well. And it's inevitable, they will not always go well. So governance becomes really crucial, I think, in applying the courage to new technology applications in their respective agencies, I would suggest, small, medium, or large. Because politics fits into it in the backdrop of all the other things of which today it's HOP, tomorrow it's against the big, we're working on a $2.7 billion capital project. Well, you don't want to lose the confidence in that as an agency relative to these other projects. So you have to keep all of this in context of the trust with the public.
Okay, well, it's certainly been a very excellent webinar. We want to thank our speakers, David, Doug, Tim, and Ryan. Wow, it's been super. Everybody, it's going to be available, the recording and the slides and the takeaways, all on APTA's Mobility Innovation Hub. Go there, you can get them all. Also, a reminder that another webinar coming soon. The next one to feature Sacramento RTD and their experience with transit and micro-mobility providers. So thank you all for attending. You can view it again. I know I will. I'll go to the website and look at listen to it one more time. Thank you very much.
All right.